So my book on digital nomads was just published, and I wanted to take this opportunity to discuss the 4 different academic articles that I had written on digital nomads, and also this major book that brings all of my research together in one place. So in 2018, I published an article entitled Digital Nomads, Employment in the Online Gig Economy in the online journal Glocalism, Journal of Culture, Politics, and Innovation. This was the first article I published on digital nomads. First of all, the term digital nomad comes from a book called Digital Nomads that was published in 1997 and written by Sugio Makimoto and David Manners. And so this was the very beginning of the internet, and they were speculating on the revolution that the internet could cause in our life. They talked about how this could really upend life, especially for middle-income tech computer workers who could now be untethered from the office and be working from a beach in a different country and living a life of leisure while they brought their computer with them. So now, skip forward to almost 25 years after this book was initially published, and this community has taken up the term digital nomad. And so what are digital nomads? Digital nomads are remote workers, people that work from their laptops for a certain percentage of their work time. They can use their freedom that comes with remote work to travel and explore other countries, luxurious places, other places in their own country, and kind of invert the work-leisure hierarchy and place leisure on the top and choose a place to live based on their leisure requirements. And this is usually, a warm tropical climate with a beach. And so Thailand becomes ground zero for the digital nomad community. And so then a community developed around this term of digital nomads, where they are coming together to gather with other community members, and this becomes a subculture. And in my research, I use the literature on subcultures because we understand that subcultures have to define themselves. Who's an insider, who's an outsider, who's an OG original in that community, who are the newcomers, the hanger-oners, and then defining like a hierarchy within any subculture. And so within the digital nomad subculture, the hierarchy is based on who can be the most remote. Like, are you 100% remote working? Do you have 1 day off a week where you can work from home? Do you have 3 days off a week? Can you really, do you have to be grounded in the place because of children or family obligations or work obligations? Or can you travel and move your whole life to Thailand and work from the beach on the laptop? And it becomes very popular within the news media. So a lot of news articles are touting and promoting this concept of digital nomadism. So you see when you read these articles that a lot of times the people promoting this lifestyle are platform company owners, tech upstart companies that really want to promote this kind of lifestyle. And then you have people that are selling the lifestyle. And so what I saw in the community also are a lot of people are unable to really figure out a solid way to make money. And so they're selling their image on Instagram, on social media, and then saying, buy my ebook, join my online class, come to my retreat in person where, I can sell you the information on how to become a digital nomad. And so a lot of people come into this lifestyle and subculture just really desiring something better in their life. They want to have a sense of purpose. They want to have a sense that they're really accomplishing something. And so they take on this lifestyle first before they have a really established remote job situation, because these people online are telling them like, well, I'll tell you how to do it. I'll tell you how to get your start with drop shipping and so on. So there's a lot of positive stories in the media, especially, a few years ago, and there's very few critical sociological voices. But some of them, the ones that do stand out are Juliet Schor, who really is a critical sociologist and Barbara Ehrenreich, who is a journalist who's really gone undercover to explore the issues of the gig economy and downwardly mobile millennials. My second article on digital nomads was published in 2019, and it was called The Digital Nomad Lifestyle: Remote Work, Leisure Balance, Privilege, and Constructed Community. And this is my most cited article. It's really gotten a lot of traction. And in this article, I overview, again, defining what the digital nomads are in this lifestyle community. And so since digital nomads invert the hierarchy of work-leisure to one of leisure-work, that's why I chose the Sociology of Leisure journal, and I used the theoretical framework of Robert Stebbins, his concept of serious leisure. And he contrasts serious leisure against casual leisure. Casual leisure is one of just, watching TV or attending a music event or, an outdoor festival or something like that. Serious leisure are those people that really take their hobby to a much more elevated level by putting a lot of time and resources into their hobby. And so digital nomads are a leisure community, and so often they come together in these conferences where digital nomads might gather together to basically be able to vacation and meet up with their colleagues in a certain city for an extended period of time. They might come to a retreat together in a co-living, co-working space, or they often gather in co-working spaces so that they can really communicate within their community. So my third article on digital nomads was published in 2019, and it was called I Get My Lovin' on the Run: Digital Nomads, Constant Travel, and Nurturing Romantic Relationships. And this was a chapter published in the anthology called The Geographies of Digital Sexualities. And so in this article, I focused specifically on how do digital nomads date. So the majority of them were single. Half of them approximately were in committed relationships with a partner. Fewer married people. Of the married people, then 3 were getting divorced. So this is a more younger lifestyle, a more single-oriented lifestyle. And so digital nomads have taken on centralizing leisure in their lifestyle, but they're also very lonely. They're traveling alone. Perhaps they meet up with friends, but they're traveling, and so it's very hard to have a relationship. So a lot of them use dating apps, and they find people in the locations in which they're based temporarily. However, of course, this is very difficult to establish a relationship because one wants to continue traveling. They don't usually want to end up settling in that specific place where they are visiting temporarily. And so this is the biggest challenge within their dating situation, is they don't want to be grounded. They ideally want to find another digital nomad that they can travel with. So there are some couples that I met that travel together, and so that can also pose challenges, like who gets to decide where you go. You have to have a pretty similar expectation for what you want from your traveling. And of course, it's almost impossible to have a family as a digital nomad while traveling. And so even though at digital nomad conferences, they'll usually have a panel about, parenting as a digital nomad and remote, and how to teach your children remotely and homeschool your children. I only met one digital nomad that actually had grown children. So I didn't personally meet any digital nomads that were able to, conduct this lifestyle with small children. So this article just focused on the love lives of digital nomads. So in 2020, I published my fourth article on the topic of digital nomads called Digital Nomadism: Mobility, Millennials, and the Future of Work in the Online Gig Economy. And this was a chapter published in the anthology by Greg Hearn called The Future of Creative Work. And so in this article, I really focus on these digital nomad millennials in the neoliberal economy. One of the major critiques I have of the digital nomad lifestyle, which is captured in this article, is that digital nomadism is an individualist economic coping strategy for adventurous millennials. So basically, the digital nomads represent this online gig economy. Most of the people that I interviewed were not working full-time for one company, but they were doing online freelance work. And so they constantly had to seek new clients. Perhaps they were working on online platforms such as Upwork or freelance types of platforms. And so they do one job, say maybe they write a search engine optimized SEO website article on fast fashion. And so maybe they only get paid, $20, $10, $50, whatever for one article. And so they're constantly having to seek work for these piecemeal payments. And so what I critique is that we're coming from that this is downwardly mobile. This is promoting the gig economy that's destroying the security and employment safety net for workers, especially in, the United States, the UK, Australia. This is a downward mobility of the entire economy for young people. And so digital nomadism isn't something to applaud, but it's really demonstrating how the gig economy is overtaking so many of the employment sectors. And so for tech workers, perhaps a lot of freelance workers are relying on that type of employment. And so for digital nomads then, basically a lot of these folks can't afford to live in their home country, in the United States, in the UK, in Australia. And so therefore living in Thailand is very appealing because it's affordable when you're making a very downwardly mobile, low wage for the UK or for the United States, but you take that wage to Thailand and you can live in the beach and live in Western style accommodations. So this is an individual coping strategy for an economy that is largely downwardly mobile for the millennial generation. And so that's what I really want to critique. I want the millennial generation to have full employment, work benefits, and so that is one of the largest critiques that I'm coming from. These folks aren't working, full-time for one company. And so the gig economy is always sold as like, oh, now you have all this free time. But that's not true at all, because no one was making very much money at all. And the gig economy doesn't give people free time. The 4-hour work week is one of the digital nomads' Bible books, but no one is working a 4-hour work week. And with the gig economy, with the online gig economy, people have to work constantly, nonstop, and they have new bosses and people that can write comments on their work performance every single day. So this is like a dystopian nightmare of employment. And so this article really captures my critique coming from that perspective. And so finally, in 2021, I published a full-length book called Digital Nomads Living on the Margins, Remote Working Laptop Entrepreneurs in the Gig Economy. And this was published with Elgar Publishing in the UK. And so this book reviews all of the other articles that I've already published, my critique of the neoliberal online gig economy. So this book was written during the pandemic, so I was able to incorporate the beginning of the pandemic and how our global shift to remote work impacts the digital nomad community and lifestyle. Now everyone is familiar with the remote work. A lot of people have worked remotely temporarily, and a lot of people might have considered moving or did move out of especially urban environments into places where they can have more space, bigger houses. So perhaps out of New York City into more upstate regions and so on. So in chapter 2, I talked about, the socioeconomic demographics of these millennials. In a lot of these newspaper articles, they might say like, oh, anyone can be a digital nomad. You just need to be passionate enough. But in reality, you need to have a particular socioeconomic status and have a particular demographic. The first thing you need is a strong passport. These are people from the US, the UK, Australia. A lot of my digital nomad participants had dual passports. They have a UK passport and an Australian passport. I mean, that is just the most, passport power you can have in this world. So if you have a passport from Thailand or, Latin America, it's going to be a lot more difficult to be able to have the freedom to travel. So that's something that they don't talk about. Also, of course, you can't have a criminal record and travel freely. And so I do ask the digital nomads if they had criminal records, and the only person who even came close was someone with a DUI which had been removed from their record. So I have a chapter 3 on outcasts of the global bazaar economy. And so just that these are neoliberal gig economy workers that are just trying to survive in this really downwardly mobile, crushing online environment. And so a lot of these folks that I interviewed had very kind of minimal jobs of, like, you know, maybe they're doing web design, but they're not professional web designers. They're just trying to you know, find a few clients to do a more easy defined website on WordPress or Wix. In chapter 4, I call it Bright-Sided, Positive Psychology and its Adaptation to Digital Nomadism. So underlying the digital nomad messaging is this constant push of positive psychology. And so I critiqued and took this whole chapter to look at the whole industry of positive psychology, where it come from, how it was established, and that there is big conservative money behind this concept of positive psychology, and how it's been adapted into the corporate environment, because positive psychology takes the focus away from structural inequalities and puts it fully on the mental outlook of the individual. So if you want it hard enough, if you dream and think about it hard enough, it'll happen. And if it doesn't happen, on the flip side, which they never say, that dark side, then it's your own damn fault, right? And so Barbara Ehrenreich has written several books on this dark side of positive psychology, and I talk about just how this particular ideology has really been incorporated to promote this kind of lifestyle. And I focus on the dark side of positive psychology. And positive psychology is a misnomer anyway. There is no positive and negative psychology. I mean, it's all together. You can't have positive without negative, you know? So it's just a ridiculous, simplistic binary. Chapter 5 is called Laptops, Sunscreen, Surfboards, and Selfies, Travel, Tourism, and Leisure Practices of the Digital Nomads. And so in this chapter, I take more of a critical perspective on the travel industry. I mean, traveling around the world constantly with these cheap international flights, this is destroying the environment. This is destructive consumerism. And to go to Thailand specifically, for example, and to pay these Airbnbs that are very expensive compared to the local prices is going to make local property owners sell more of their apartments instead of the local community for long-term leases to these short-term leases to Westerners, where they can get a lot more money. So this raises the prices for the local people. So this really causes a lot of damage for the local people and the local economy. Digital nomads can just move on to the next cheap place, but the people who are living in these communities cannot leave. You know, with their Thailand passport, they're a lot more limited in their ability to travel. And so digital nomads don't talk about the impact that they have, besides the positive of what they see. Oh, we bring money to these local economies. Well, they bring a lot of negativity and destruction and raising of the price. And then they can come to these places like Thailand and cause trouble, you know, treat the people poorly, and then they can bounce whenever when things get too hot. But they might be causing a lot of destruction and abusing the people, abusing the local resources. In chapter 6, called Seeking Same, Digital Nomads Seek Community, I talk about the community that digital nomads develop. So even though they want to travel, they want to meet people from the world, shockingly, they never ever learn another language so that they can speak to local people in the local language. And they also don't really interact with local people. Like, they go, you know, to Thailand, and then they're going to live in a Western style Airbnb. They're going to go to a co-working space that's too expensive for local people to attend to. And so they just hang out with other Westerners. They say things like, oh, you know, to my Western ears, I just can't learn the Thai language, you know. But also they spend a year in Spain and they're like, well, we haven't learned any Spanish. Well, learning language is about power, right? So if you're speaking English, then the whole world has been colonized, by the English language. Well, where they go, and so it's about power. So you don't have to learn the other language. It's not that you can't, do it, because people in those places have learned to speak English because, that's how the power flows. You need to speak English in order to get those Western dollars. In chapter 7, it's called Marginalized Identities, Social Justice, and Volunteerism. There's a whole industry of voluntary tourism where white women especially travel to an impoverished country in order to do some kind of volunteer work for a week or 2 weeks. But really it comes down to traveling. It's a vacation. And it's, they're taking selfies with the local people. It's just very kind of, has this like neo-colonial feel to it, this white savior complex. And they don't really create lasting help in these locations that they go, these kind of long-term lasting bonds with the community. And they might even be creating damage to that community. And it ends up being more about the person taking the selfie than what they're actually contributing. And so in chapter 7, I really critique this kind of volunteer tourism practice. And in chapter 8, I talk about digital nomads as canaries in the coal mine, disruption in the future of work and leisure. And so, the digital nomads are showing us the future of downwardly mobile, of the gig economy taking over all aspects of different kinds of employment sectors. And so this is really something that we should be concerned about. For example, as a professor, adjuncting has taken over a huge percentage of all the college classes that are taught. And each industry has its way to outsource work and to save money for that industry. And these things aren't going to revert back to full-time employment in the future. So this is a big concern. Another thing that I include in this book is, talking about just how, digital nomads are presumed to be white. And so it's coming from this kind of, and they use the term bromad, this kind of stereotype of this bromad nomad who's this white guy in Thailand on the beach surfing and drinking and, kind of causing disruption in the local community. And so a lot of tourism is based on this presumed whiteness and heterosexuality and, ability and so on. So what I wanted to kind of challenge that and talk about marginalized identities within travel culture. And so some of the conferences that I attended were focused on, women travelers. One of them really wanted to focus on marginalized communities, women, LGBT, people of color, and so on. And they really tried to incorporate those voices within their platform of their digital nomad conference. And so I focus on that as well. Like I really, if you're not a heterosexual, white, younger, beautiful person traveling, then there's a lot of other things to consider. So for example, some of the things I talk about are, traveling for people of color, LGBT travelers, people with disabilities traveling, and what their concerns and considerations are going to be with traveling and their challenges, and the things that we didn't talk about, like just that you have to have some resources to be able to travel. And these folks would say, oh, I don't really have anything. But if you have family that can buy you like a plane ticket home from Thailand if you get in trouble, that's quite a resource, and something that a lot of people don't have. Or just that you have the freedom to travel and that you don't need to be home like, babysitting your siblings or taking care of grandma or helping out your family, working and contributing to your family. But you have this freedom to just go do you, like that's a very kind of white middle class background that a lot of other people might just not have the freedom to really jump upon. If you're a person of color and you're traveling and you have to think about racism within that potential place that you might travel, things are not as rosy and as comfortable. And so it's pretty awkward when you have like, an interracial group of friends, talking about let's go to this place. Oh, well, maybe it's not as comfortable for other people. If you're a LGBT traveler, you know, you might look up what are the laws around LGBT rights in that country. You know, perhaps, you know, some countries still outlaw and criminalize homosexuality. Some countries might not have recognize legal parenting rights and so on. So some people might not want to travel to those countries where their parental rights might be challenged, or they might face legal harassment or street harassment and so on. And definitely for people with disabilities, like, they have a lot of challenges as far as just, you know, having their mobility issues or, you know, whatever issues they have addressed. And so I follow several, you know, Instagram travelers who talk about the challenges of, you know, the airlines hurting your wheelchair, or finding accessible Airbnbs and so on. So I think it's really important to focus on disability issues within travel, and especially to write about it, blog about it, because, you know, people with disabilities want to know, like, where can they go that it's accessible, and people aren't really paying attention and noting those things. In the United States, we have some, you know, disability requirements, but other countries have even less. And of course the US is not, it doesn't have enough, but it has, you know, some standards, and so other countries have less. So there's a lot to critique from a critical sociological perspective of the digital nomad community. And so that's what my body of work has done. And I think it's an important thing to really just have this sociological challenge of this lifestyle that is very much promoting and embedded within a neoliberal economy, and that this is not the way for future workers to have freedom. You know, what we need to have worker freedom are stronger unions. We need to be able to have gig economy and platform economy workers organize together and to demand some of those profits back to the workers that are doing these jobs. Because we see now, you know, Uber drivers, grocery delivery people, I mean, they are really, really scraping by and are hard pressed to make a living. And they're not being paid even minimum wages because of these kinds of structures of the economy. So it's really important for workers to come together and be able to organize, and the workers need to make more of this money and have these full-time jobs with security. So those are some of my critiques of digital nomadism. I've written a lot of articles, and now my book is out, so I hope you can read it, enjoy it, and definitely give me some feedback. And thank you so much for listening.